Hello again, everyone. I'm Joe Longinusa, welcoming you to another edition of Next on the Tee with Chris Mascaro, the show where industry leaders, golf professionals, and legends all come and discuss the great game we love so much. So without further ado, let's turn it over to our host to tell us who's next on the tee. Chris, take it away.
Hey, thank you, Joe LaGenusa. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining me again this morning on Next on the Tee. I'm your host, Chris Mascaro, and this morning I have the wonderful honor and privilege to have two great guests to share with you. First up is going to be Donnie Hammond. Donnie won twice on the regular tour and once on what was then the buy.com tour, now the web.com tour. And you may not remember, but Donnie was also in the mix for what many of us consider our favorite Masters of all time. We'll get that story plus many others from his time out on the PGA Tour, now the Champions Tour, when Donnie joins me here in just a moment. Following Donnie is going to be Mr. Ben Wright. We'll have Mr. Ben Wright back with us. It's always such a privilege getting to spend time with him. He's one of the greatest broadcasters, as you know, of all time, and in my opinion, one of the best storytellers anywhere on the planet. We'll find out more about his fascinating life and get his take on this year's Masters when he joins me about 25 minutes from now. So it's going to be a great show, and I'm so glad that you're here to take the journey with me over the next hour. Next on the Tee is brought to you by Seymour Putters. Let's get things started by hearing a word about those wonderful folks.
Golfers, has this happened to you? Great drive, perfect second shot on the green, only to 3 or even 4 putt, shaking your head all the way back to the cart. I have good news. Help is on the way with the Seymour Putter. The Seymour Putter Company patented RST technology sets up the putter perfectly every time, using a visible gun sight on the top line. Genius. It's like locking radar onto the target, in this case, the golf hole, putting the golfer in perfect position to make a reliable and consistent stroke. The 1999 U.S. Open and 2007 Masters champions both use, you guessed it, the Seymour Putter. So if you're ready to make more putts and take strokes off your game, log on to Seymour.com. That's SEEMORE.com and put a Seymour Putter in your bag today.
Like Joe said, check out the Rifle Scope technology that helped win 2 majors and 35 tour events so far, and it's going to help you make more putts too. Check them out online at Seymour, and like Joe said, it's SEEMORE.com. Also want to kick off this show like we do every single week here on Next on the Tee by saluting the brave men and women serving in our military. We want to thank all of you for your daily sacrifices and for what you do to keep the rest of us safe. We also want to thank our veterans for all you've done over the years. We truly appreciate what you have done to preserve our freedoms and our liberties. It's through your strength and your efforts that our way of life is even possible. Our sincere thanks as well to Sean Cruz and all the wonderful folks over at the Armed Forces Radio Network. It's an honor for us to have our show be a part of your network. You can find us by going to armedforcesradionetwork.org. Also want to let our veterans know, be sure to check out globalvoiceforveterans.org. It's a great site with news and articles and a wealth of information designed specifically for veterans that I'm sure you're going to find both interesting and beneficial. Go to globalvoiceforveterans.org to find out more information. Also want to thank everyone listening in on iHeartRadio as well as great radio sites across the internet like Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, Player.fm, and Blog Talk Radio as well. Plus, if someone's dragging you to the mall or to the grocery store or you're just tired of the same old on your commute, download the Player.fm or Stitcher app on your smartphone, and you can take us with you everywhere you go. Let us give you something fun to focus on while you're out and about. All right, now joining us on the Seymour Putters guest line is Mr. Donnie Hammond. Before we get to Donnie, let me give you some background on him. He was born in Frederick, Maryland, which is in the northern part of Maryland near the Virginia and West Virginia lines. He attended Jacksonville University and was a 4-year letterman on their golf team. As a sophomore, he placed 7th in the 1977 Sun Belt Championship, and as a senior, he won it. He is a charter member of Jacksonville University Sports Hall of Fame. Donnie earned his tour card by being a medalist at the 1982 PGA Tour Qualifying Championship at TPC Sawgrass. Won it by a record 14 strokes, folks. Played on the PGA Tour from 1983 to 1998. He won twice on the regular tour at the 1986 Bob Hope Chrysler Classic and the 1989 Texas Open, where he came within one stroke of the all-time scoring record, having shot rounds of 65, 64, 65, 64 at Oak Hill. He also won once on the Buy.com Tour, what's now the Web.com Tour, at the 2000 Lakeland Classic. And over the course of Donnie's career, he's had 46 top 10 finishes and made the cut 70% of the time that he teed it up. And I am honored to have him with me here next on the tee this morning. Good morning, Donnie. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, sure thing, Chris. Great to be with you.
So, Donnie, let's start at the beginning. Who first introduced you to the game of golf, and when did you start playing?
I started, I'd say, a little bit late for a lot of the tour pros. I started when I was 13 with my dad, like a lot of players, and we had to go watch the Baltimore Colts practice, which would be about 20 minutes from my house, and then we'd go play 9 holes. This is back, it was like Johnny Unitas, Ray Berry, Lenny Moore, great Colt teams back there. And we'd go out and throw the ball around with the Shula kids and Don. It was a lot lower key environment back then. We'd play 9, and then after a couple of weeks, I said, Dad, you know what? I really like this golf. And we just started skipping the Colts practice, and we'd go play 18 or 27, and I was hooked. You know how when you get hooked on golf, it just really gets you, and it didn't take long for me. It took a mere 2 weeks, and I just loved the game after that.
Wow. So, Donnie, who were some of your, as a youngster at 13, and when you finally getting started, you say a couple years after that, who were some of the guys that you admired growing up?
Well, I mean, the big 2 pros for me was Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus. Arnie, you just watched the way Arnie competed and the way he swung at the ball and just, the dashing attitude he had out on the golf course. That was, I picked up a lot from Arnold early, and then the technical part of Jack Nicklaus and the combination of power, just his thoroughness, the way he would map out a golf course, and just seemed like he would always make putts on the 18th hole. So I always remember trying to swing a lot more like Jack than I did Arnold, but those 2 were the 2 big leaders, you would say, for me growing up, and probably Jack was my favorite because I just watched him play all the time.
So Donnie, how does a kid from Frederick, Maryland, in the heart of ACC country, end up playing his college golf at Jacksonville State?
The weather. All this, you go through some of those winters, especially like, say, this last winter. I got to think there's going to be a lot of people from Boston buying second homes in Florida after this last winter. But after, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, playing on the frozen tundra in December up there, I thought, you know what, Dad, maybe we should visit some schools down there in Florida. And that's what we did. We took a trip, 75. Actually, we stopped at the Masters. I had a little gig where I was a gallery guard there in 75 with my dad. He had a friend in the military that got us. I worked on 13 where the drives come down up there to the right. And that was the year Jack Nicklaus held off Tom Weiskopf, Johnny Miller, I think. I was right behind the green when Puttin held the putter up and kind of jogged off the green. And then the next year, I got back there was 86 and mentioned that to Jack, and he said, you should have showed up a few more times at the Masters. But I mean, I saw the school at Jacksonville, and I thought this is for me to come to Florida and play golf year round. And it was a perfect fit for me. We had a great coach, Raleigh Rourke. He was a real athletic type that, coached basketball and got us in shape, had us out there jogging stuff. I'm thinking golfers don't have to jog, but he really got us in shape, and it was just a great 4 years. I had a ball and really got myself ready to, hopefully go play the tour after that 4 years.
So, Donnie, your senior year, you shot a 4 under par 68 in the final round of the Sun Belt Conference Championship to finish 6 under par overall, win the individual title. Unfortunately, South Florida ended up winning the team title by a couple of strokes over Jacksonville. But what do you remember about playing those 54 holes?
Well, that was kind of toward the end of, we're getting ready to graduate. I had a degree in psychology. I was getting ready to finish that up. And I was staring right dead into the face of going back to college, get my master's, or start working, or pursue golf, which is what I wanted to do ever since I was like 14 years old. So that was the time that I thought, you got to start playing. You got to start posting some numbers and really get serious about the game. And, winning that tournament, I think I won by 6 strokes, but it really gave me the confidence to go to Florida and chase the mini tours after that, which was in Orlando. And that, that was a nice little tournament for me to really give me an edge and go ahead and pursue my dream and play on the tour. And that was a big week for me to win that tournament.
You mentioned winning by 6 strokes there, and you were, you had some tournaments that you really lapped the field. Like I said, in your intro, you were, way ahead at Q School, winning by 14 strokes at the, TPC Sawgrass. Typically, I hear about, stories from Q School it being some of the most stressful rounds guys play, but you sort of walked right through it. What made it so easy for you? Was it the familiarity with TPC Sawgrass, or was it something else?
Well, actually, my last practice round, the day before the last round, I didn't play very well at all. I was out there struggling a little bit with my swing. I went to the range, spent a good hour and a half working on my setup, and just found a little key that I was kind of firming up my right knee and relaxing my left knee. And it was just one of those weeks where that was the key, was that little key on the setup. And it just was one of those dream weeks that you need, that, because that was the tour school. If I didn't make it that year, that was my 3rd try. If I didn't make it that one, it was pretty much going to be, let's go back and figure out what we're going to do the rest of our life. So between having the adrenaline and the extra energy that week and then that little key, I'm still trying to find that magic that I had that week, because that was probably the best week I've ever played. Came at a good time.
Indeed. So, Donnie, I got to know, when you're teeing it up on 17 at the Players' Championship and, when you were trying to go through Q School, is that the most stressful tee shot that you play all year?
It really is. I mean, it's, the wind gets a little swirling there. Usually it's just a little right to left, and it's only about a 9-iron. I mean, it's 135, 145 yards. You got huge crowds, though. You start thinking about it when you walk off the 16th green. You're looking over there and you're watching guys hit that are in front of you, and it's just a crescendo building until that shot. And golf is a very non-reactionary sport. You're just standing down there addressing the golf ball, and my mind is always more active than it should be anyway. So I'm sitting there thinking of all kind of things standing over the shot, and you just do the best you can. You're going to hit a few in the water, but every now and then you're going to hit one close, but it's kind of a survival shot on that golf course. It's one that you really have to get over and just focus on your target and swing. That's the key on that hole.
You got your first win on tour in 1986 at the Bob Hope Classic. You won that event in a playoff over John Cook. Take us through that event, and who did you get to play with in the Celebrity Pro-Am piece? Because I got to imagine that's a fun benefit of getting to play in that tournament.
That tournament was a blast. For years, I got to play in it 20 or 25 times. Once you win, you get to play every year, and I've played with some great celebrities. One year I played with Willie Mays, first day,
wow.
Johnny Bench, and George Brett. So, I mean, I played with three of the greatest baseball players ever, and I loved baseball, so I loved Johnny Bench and the Big Red Machine, and Willie was fantastic. George Brett, good golfer. But then when I was lucky enough to win in '86, I got to come back the next year and play with Mr. Bob Hope, President Ford, and Tip O'Neill, who was, former Speaker of the House. And so that just became a friendship that I had with President Ford over the years, and he invited me to come up to Vail and play in his tournament. Got to play in that 10 or 12 times, and, great bunch of people. And, that was kind of my first experience really with, learning more about the military and, the service that the president had, and just got to talk to him a little bit about that. And just a great experience, being able to win that tournament and then having those relationships after that.
That win got you into the 86 Masters, which for so many of us is our favorite golf memory, particularly myself, like you. I grew up a big Jack Nicklaus fan. You were actually tied for second heading into the final round, only a stroke behind Greg Norman, tied with Seve and Bernhard Langer and Nick Price. You eventually finished tied for 11th. But what was it like trying to sleep on the thought that you could actually win that thing, plus being in the mix with those guys?
As crazy as it was, I shot a 67 on Saturday, and I felt pretty calm that evening. I think I slept pretty well. I can't remember, but I woke up in the morning. I was shaving, and I was looking at myself, and I was saying to myself, there's your next Masters champion right there. You're looking at him, and I was confident. And then I think I had a pretty good practice session, but when I stood on that first tee, one stroke back, in the next to last group, I swore I could have seen my knees shaking just a little bit. And I'm thinking, I wonder if those people can see that, because I could feel it. It was a little nervy, that front nine, but settled down and, ended up having a good tournament. But being on the golf course that day, it was electric when Jack's name went up, and you look up on the leaderboard and you think to yourself, Jack thinks he can win this tournament at 45 years old. And then he starts making another birdie. Then he makes that eagle on 15, and it just was electric around the golf course. You're almost out there as much a spectator as you are a participant, because I was kind of out of the tournament after about 11 holes of winning. I was just trying to secure, as high a finish as I could after that. But it was a great day, and then when I got to watch it, it was even better after that.
Like you say, you were in the next to the last group. You were paired with Bernhard Langer, and I had read that there were only about 50 people in the gallery around Norman and Nick Price, because everyone, you allude to, was up ahead with either Nicklaus and Sandy Lyle or Ballesteros and Kite. Was it pretty quiet for you guys in the last two groups until you kind of got back, most of the way through the back nine?
There might have been only family members in our group after Jack started making his run. It was very much like that, Chris. There had to be 70% of the gallery out there was trying to get a look at Jack to finish, and you could tell exactly where he was when he would, he would eagle 15 and birdie 17. You knew exactly what had happened when he would sink that putt, and it seemed like everybody was following him toward the end of the day.
So, to your point, the roars are going up for Mr. Nicklaus, when he was putting on that charge. I've heard so many stories about how loud it was and how it affected some guys, who are playing shots on other holes. Could you tell, to your point, could you hear what was going on? And, at what point did you guys sort of recognize that Nicklaus was making a charge and he was in a position to win this thing?
I think it was about the time we got to 11. You could see, every 3 or 4 holes there'd be one of the big leaderboards that you could see. I think 11 we got a pretty good look at the big leaderboard out there by 12, 13, and we could see, because he would have been up ahead about 4 holes, and then we kind of knew what was going on after that. You could see, what was happening with the big leaderboards, and that would be every couple holes or so. But you could tell when the birdies were coming up with Jack on the course. Your best
finish in a major was tied for 5th at the Open Championship in 1992, which was played at Muirfield in Scotland, won by Nick Faldo. You shot 65 in the second round to get yourself near the top of the leaderboard. What do you remember about that week?
The British Open?
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite tournaments going over there. I think I had to qualify that year, but it was just a great experience to travel overseas and play those type of golf courses. It's just a thrill to qualify, because then you're going to be there for the week and be a part of the tournament. And then I had my coach over that year, Phil Ritson, that I was working with, and we just worked a lot on downplaying the big event and just going through our procedure. And we just kind of kept my head down and tried to hit every shot as well as I could that week. And great having him over there. That was really nice to have a top 5 in a major. That's, some of the best fields of the year, the Open Championship and the U.S. Open and the TPC. Those were all the top players were there. So, that was really fun for me to be able to compete at that level.
Did you prepare differently to play when you're going over to England or Scotland to play in a British Open with the link style and the weather and the wind and all of the things that are different than playing, on the tour, here in the U.S.? Do you have to prepare differently for different types of shots that you're going to have to play over there versus here?
Yeah, you're going to have to hit some knockdown shots. I think over the years, a few of the things that I would work on, before heading over there is I'd be in Florida and it might be 90 degrees and I'm getting ready for the British Open where it could be 40 or 50 degrees wearing two sweaters and a rain jacket. But I would try to keep the back of my right hand real firm on the shot and not let the club flip, where the head gets to the ball first. I would try to keep the butt of the club moving, and I would do that with the back of my right hand. And that seemed to work a couple years over there. And of course, you're packing, might be 90 degrees out, and you're packing your best cashmere sweaters, your rain jackets, rain pants. You don't want to come up short over there because you don't know what kind of weather you're going to get over there. And that's hard to do when it's 95 degrees outside, is pack 4 or 5 sweaters.
I bet. So, Donnie, you get your second win on tour at the 89 Texas Open. It was shortened to 54 holes, but another tournament that you won by a large number. You got 7 over Paul Azinger. So there were a few times, like I said earlier in your career, that you just sort of blew away the field, and this was another one of those times. What was it about that time in 89 at that Texas Open that came together for you by such a big margin?
Well, I only, went into the last round with a 2-shot lead, and, I was nervous. That was always my strategy on Sunday. I told the press the day before, they said, "What's your strategy for Sunday?" I said, "It's like it's going to be every Sunday. Walk fast and look worried." And that seemed to be, what you always try to do on the tour, because that's the payday, A shot's going to cost you all this money. Your banker's going to let you know how much a stroke or two costs you. So you just kind of hang in there. I hung in there on the front 9, made a couple quick birds, made eagle, I think, on the 10th hole, and then ended up having about a 5-shot lead with 8 holes to go or so. And then, it was easier to relax a little bit. You're just trying to make a few pars and then just kind of coasted into where it was one of those rare weeks that nothing bad happens. You always, even your good weeks, you're going to have a double here or a couple bogeys there, and that was just one of those weeks that, nothing bad really seemed to happen out there. It doesn't really happen that often on tour, but that was a week for me that I'll remember, because, winning on the tour by 7 is really tough to do. So that was a great week.
And to that end, Donnie, we've seen a number of times where people that once you get a big lead, they sort of, like we see in football, right? You start playing prevent defense, right? So you're playing prevent a big number as opposed to continuing to keep your foot on the gas. How does it you manage to not, right? It seems like not play that way. But does that come into your mind? Do you have an internal struggle like, okay, here, maybe I take a 2-iron off the tee versus I would normally hit driver? How do you make sure that you don't let people get back in to the tournament once you've built up a big lead?
That is a really tough thing to do. I mean, you see it in all sports, don't you? Basketball team trying to hold the ball and kind of wind the clock down a little bit, then they don't get off a good shot. Golf, you just try to play one shot at a time, and you try to concentrate as much as you can. What you can do is you take a little bit more of a conservative line, but you try to make as an aggressive swing as you can. So that was always my strategy is, if there's water left and I got a 3-shot lead, I may aim at another 5 yards right, but I'm going to try to swing as aggressive as I can. And that's the key, where you're not trying to steer it. You know how you get out on the golf course and you try to steer it down there. You got water left and houses to the right, and you just try to ease it down the middle, and you're gonna hit somebody's roof without a doubt. But if you swing it with confidence and say, "I'm sending this down the fairway," at least that gives you a better chance to hit a good shot. And it's not easy to do, though. When you're out there and a lot of people are watching, a lot of money on the line, it's easier said than done. But that's what you try to do.
So, Donnie, like I mentioned in your intro, you were inducted into your alma mater Sports Hall of Fame. What was it like being recognized like that by Jacksonville State?
Yeah, Jacksonville University had some great basketball players back there. Pembroke Burroughs, Artis Gilmore. They played for the national championship against UCLA 3 or 4 years before I got there, and so always had a great basketball program. So it was great to be included with some of those athletes and be able to go up there every couple years and say hi to the guys. It was just it's nice to be recognized once in a while when you've helped a school like that, and then you get to go back and be a part of it. It's part of the rewards of working really hard and having some breaks along the way.
Donnie, for our listeners on the Armed Forces Radio Network here, I know you've done some work with the USO down there in Orlando. Talk about the things that you've done to, be a part of, our military and our veterans.
Yeah, you're not going to find a bigger fan than me of the military and the sacrifice that they go through. I've been lucky. I had a good friend from Maryland, Rick Kell, that does work with Troops First Foundation. Him and David Faraday, invited me to go on a few trips over to Iraq, a couple of USO trips, and I got to do that in 2007 and 2009 during Thanksgiving. But a lot of the forward operating bases there in Iraq and visit the guys, that are over there. We took a bunch of golf clubs, balls, hats, gave away a bunch of things, did some clinics, and, gave some lessons, let them hit a bunch of shots. And it was, as far as golf goes, it had to be one of the highlights of my life to visit the troops, in a war area like that, and just bring a little bit of diversion to them, while they're out doing their job. And
right.
Really memorable for me. And the guys were so funny over there too. They would show up. I'm thinking there's not going to be many people show up for golfers over here, and we had 500, 600 people there having little putting clinics and makeshift driving ranges and stuff, and there were some great swings over there. One of the guys had a beautiful swing. I said, "Man, you got a great swing." He said, "Oh yeah, we got some good swings over here, Donnie. We just don't have any grass." There's nothing but rocks everywhere, rocks and sand. Not a lot of good tracks over there in Iraq, but it was so much fun for me, and kept in touch with a few of the guys over the years, and just super, and so much respect for what the sacrifices. Got to meet a lot of the families, and just see the sacrifice that they go through. And now a lot of the guys are on their 8th, 10th, 12th tour overseas, and it's just, you can see what it does when they're packing up to leave for a year at a time, the families. And I just have so much respect in what they do and what they have done, for a couple hundred years for our country, really.
Right. So, Donnie, when might we see you out on the Champions Tour next?
Well, I'm going to try to qualify in Iowa in about 3 weeks, the principal. Got a little 3-day tournament here in Orlando starting Monday. I'll be playing a lot of the events this year, try to qualify for the Senior U.S. Open. I'm up here in the Villages right now doing an event for combat veterans to careers, a group I started working with a couple of years ago, and we have a little thing here that's really fun. David Booth has a great group that transitions soldiers to jobs within the golf industry up here in the Villages, and a bunch of great guys. They love it. I come up and play golf once in a while with them, and we gamble a little bit and just have a good time. And we're up here raising some money for them today, and it's
that's great.
But I'll play a full schedule out there on the Champions this year, try to qualify. I have to qualify for the tournaments now, so it's a little tougher, but just trying to get the game back and see if I can, make a little something happen before it's all over.
There you go. Donnie, how can our listeners follow you online and over social media?
Mostly Twitter. I'm at Donnie Hammond, Donnie, and then Hammond's Hammond. I post up some pictures and do some things. Actually, I'll put something up here pretty soon, some pictures from the event today, and I'll keep everybody up to date what's going on, and I'll be following you guys. I love your show, and listeners are going to have a great time listening to Ben Wright. He is fantastic. Got some super stories, and I could listen to him talk all day. He's fantastic.
Indeed. Donnie, thank you so much for taking time out of your morning to be a part of the show. You're fantastic. I hope you'll come back and join me again sometime. I'd love to continue the conversation and hear how this season's going for you.
I would love to, Chris. I'd love to. Anything to help you guys and the soldiers. So you let me know anytime.
All right, I appreciate it, Donnie. Thanks for being here again, and all the best to you and your family. And hopefully we get the opportunity to catch up with you real soon.
All right, thank you, Chris.
All right, take care, Donnie. Donnie Hammond, boy, I tell you what, that last piece, talking about the things that he's doing with the USO and our military and raising funds and stuff like that. Boy, I really appreciate Donnie sharing that and some great stories and being a part of that back 9 in '86 at the Masters. Everyone who listens to this show knows what a big fan of Mr. Nicklaus I am, and '86 has a particular place in my heart. So to hear that story was absolutely wonderful. Look forward to catching up with Donnie Hammond again real soon. All right, now joining me on the Seymour Putters guest line is the aforementioned Mr. Ben Wright. Let me remind you about Mr. Wright's background because it's so amazing. Every time he joins me, I want for any of our new listeners that haven't joined us when he's been on the show in the past to get a feel for what this man's background was like. He was educated at the Felsted School in Essex, England, and at London University, was a Russian interpreter in the British Army. 1954, he became a sports writer, then a golf correspondent with the Daily Dispatch in Manchester and the Daily Mirror in London, before becoming a freelance writer and a broadcaster in 1961. He wrote weekly columns for The Observer and Sunday Times national newspapers, contributed regularly to Time magazine and Sports Illustrated. He did broadcasts for the BBC Radio and Television and ITV, a British commercial network, was a founder and associate editor for Golf World in the UK, and joined the Financial Times as its first ever golf correspondent in 1966, and wrote a weekly column until 1989, in addition to serving as an announcer for CBS TV Sports starting in 1972. Mr. Wright's broadcasting golf career with the BBC, ITV, Australian TV, and New Zealand, fantastic. From 1993 to 1996, he hosted the world feed of the Sun City $1 Million Challenge and broadcast the World Cup of Golf in Cape Town, South Africa in 1996. And he will forever live in the minds and hearts of golf fans for the wonderful work he did at CBS Broadcasting, particularly at the Masters, and like I say, in 1986 with Mr. Nicklaus's amazing victory there, but for so many years prior to that. And I am so honored that he is back with me next on the tee this morning. Mr. Wright, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure, Chris. I get a bit embarrassed by your lengthy dissertation about my mediocre career, but we won't hold that against you.
I appreciate that. Mr. Wright, I, like millions of people around the world, love the Masters tournament. But it's missing a little something, and that little something, like I say every time you're on the show, is your voice calling from the 15th hole. And, I miss you being a part of that event. Do you miss being a part of it too?
Oh, I do, Chris. It's one of the things I most miss in life. And when the Masters comes round, as of course it just has, I get really antsy. I would love to be a part of that, but it doesn't matter. You have to move on. And I was absolutely bowled over by the performance of Jordan Spieth a few weeks ago. It was, I thought, one of the greatest tour de force that I've ever witnessed. And for a kid of 21, it's hard for me to realize how mature and so composed that young man was. And there was nothing better, Chris, than the up and down he made at the 18th on Saturday evening, having double bogeyed the 17th. A double bogey at 18 would probably have derailed him. And I have had the shot he had, and I played it twice, and I never got within 30 feet of the hole when I was playing pretty good golf, single-figure handicap. And I heard, and I don't know, I've not confirmed it, I heard that Faldo and Baker Finch went out there and tried the same shot, and they didn't get within 30 feet of the hole. So I just want to, I wanted to say before I forgot just how magnificent the golf of young Jordan Spieth has become. And, I mean, he is now knocking at Rory McIlroy's door. And what a wonderful prospect it is for anybody who loves golf as much as I do, to think that these two may be going at it head-to-head for decades. You never know.
Mr. Wright, people are talking so much, and you kind of allude to it, about Jordan Spieth having such a very high golf IQ, and it was certainly a sign of intelligence for him to seek the counsel of Ben Crenshaw's longtime caddy there at Augusta, Carl Jackson, to help learn how to play the course, even though he finished second, the year before. So, I mean, sort of, what did you think about him reaching out to Carl Jackson in that way?
I thought, everything about Jordan Spieth inspires me totally. I can see no weakness in his game, because whenever he makes the vestige of a mistake, he has this ability, just like Jack Nicklaus had, to conjure something quite magical quickly to restore the balance, as it were, right the boat. And, they don't come along too often. And when I allude to Jack Nicklaus, I think that's the highest praise I can bestow on Jordan Spieth, that he has that ability to conjure up magic when most required. And I think that's a very rare bird in this game of ours.
Before you joined me, Mr. Wright, I was talking to Donnie Hammond, who was in the next to last group in the final round back in 1986. Do you recall Donnie being in contention? Because he's a guy that you lose in that wonderful event, because you had obviously Mr. Nicklaus with the win, but Greg Norman was in the final group along with Nick Price. You had Ballesteros and Tom Kite, and obviously Mr. Nicklaus and Sandy Lyle. But Donnie Hammond isn't the name that comes to mind when you think about the final round of the '86 Masters. Do you remember Donnie being back there?
I do. I remember Donnie very fondly. I think he probably was not as mature as he might have been at that time. Listening to him as I did when I called you, and they put me in to listen to the program, I can hear a maturity and grace that Donnie Hammond was a little short of in those days. I never thought he believed sufficiently in himself to really succeed. He was always self-deprecating, and I think sometimes you just got to assert yourself in any sport. You've got to really firmly believe, and I'm not sure that Donnie really firmly believed that he was as good as he was.
Sandy Lyle played with Mr. Nicklaus in that final round. Did you ever get a chance to talk to Sandy Lyle to get his perspective on what it was like playing alongside Jack Nicklaus that day?
Yes, I did. I talked, as a matter of fact, that same evening with Sandy, and he said to me that it was just one of the most moving experiences of his whole life. He hadn't any idea that Nicklaus had a chance to win the event when they started out. And he even thought, as I did, that Nicklaus may have blown it when he bogeyed 12. But, of course, the rest is history. And Sandy said it was almost as exciting to witness Nicklaus winning as it was to win himself when he made that great bunker shot from the fairway bunker at 18 to birdie the hole, which had not been done to win the event in the history of the Masters at that time.
You were a part of so many of those wonderful Masters events over the years, and I'm sure you had some dealings with Clifford Roberts, who was known to be a sharp critic of the broadcasters. What were your dealings like with Mr. Roberts?
Well, I was scared to death of him, Chris. I was absolutely scared to death of him. And Bill McPhail, who was then the boss of CBS TV Sports, pushed me into his cottage to be vetted by Mr. Roberts before I made my debut for CBS at the Masters. And, of course, I was frightened silly. And this booming voice said, "Do you like tea, young Wright, most of you limeys?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I do." And he pointed to a lovely china tea set that was set on the table, and he said, "Pour yourself a cup and enjoy it, and before I talk to you." And of course, I nearly burned myself fatally by trying to drink it too hot, but I gagged it down, and then I shall never forget it. Mr. Roberts said, "Talk to me, boy," and I said, "What would you like me to talk about, Mr. Roberts?" And he said, "I don't care, just talk to me, boy." So I started to reel off some of the things I'd accomplished, which were not very significant. And he held up his hand after about 45 seconds and said, "That'll do." And I had that awful sinking feeling that I must have said something wrong and that I was being summarily dismissed, never to be heard from again. And he said to me, "Are you worried why I stopped you so soon?" And I said, "Well, I hadn't said very much, Mr. Roberts." And he said, "You didn't need to, boy." And I said, "Why, sir?" And he said, "Well, McPhail brought in a gentleman last year from Glasgow, Scotland. And his name was Bob Ferrier. Well, I knew Bob very well because we were colleagues on the Daily Mirror at one stage. And I wondered why Roberts would talk about Bob Ferrier. And then he said, "And I might tell you, Mr. Wright, I did not understand a goddamn word he said in any of the 4 days, but you all do. Have a good week." And I was dismissed. And I left. And of course, the rest is history, you know. I stayed with the network for 27 years. 27 of the most wonderful years of my life, I might add. I mean, I never had a better time than working for Mr. Frank Chitinian, along with Jack Whitaker, Pat Summerall, Ken Venturi, and all that gang, including the idiot Gary McCourt. I have to get that in the hope he's listening somewhere.
I'll make sure I tweet that out to him. Maybe he'll take a listen. So Mr. Wright, is that the same story? Because I'd read a story that following an interview that you had done with Peter Oosterhuis during a rain delay in the third round inside the Butler cabin, is that Mr. Roberts had made a proclamation about that you had cemented your position on the broadcast team. Is that the same story?
Well, yes, it is. He wrote, Mr. Roberts wrote to Bill McPhail after that debut of mine for CBS at the Masters, my first Masters for them. He wrote a letter to Mr. McPhail saying, "That young English boy, Wright, was sufficiently astute and speaks well enough for me to understand, and he should be moved to a much more prominent position. Well, of course, as a rookie, they hide you at 14 because it doesn't get on the air much more now than it ever did in the old days.
Right.
And I was moved to 15 because anything that Roberts told MacPhail made sure he did it with alacrity, because there were, everyone at CBS was scared witless that we would lose the contract for the Masters, which I'm happy to say has never happened. And it's a year-by-year thing. But, of course, being moved to 15 really made my career, as it were, because it is definitely one of the pivotal parts of the tournament, the 15th hole. It still is, even. It's amazing how guys out of nowhere can take a double bogey there. And this year, I noticed that more people went in the water behind the green than they did in front of the green, in the pond in front of the green. And that is something that I never saw in my day. It was very rare for anybody to go in the water at the 16th hole behind the 15th green. And very, very plentiful were the shots that went into the pond in front of the 15th green.
Mm-hmm. That's right. You mentioned it a moment ago now about the potential budding rivalry that we might be able to see between Jordan Spieth and Rory McIlroy for many years to come. But I'm curious, do you think that golf needs a rivalry like that? We never really got it. We wanted it for so many years, right, with Tiger and Phil, and we never really got it there. We had it way back when Jack and Arnie were kind of going back and forth in the early 60s with the green jackets. But golf, to me, golf is so much better when not only did you have Jack and Arnie going at it, but the introduction of Gary Player, and I know you and Mr. Player are very good friends. We had Billy Casper, who people may not don't give enough credit to for how often he won in the 60s. Lee Trevino and Tom Watson. We had so many great players in the 70s, sort of battling it out. Do we need a 1 versus 2 battle, or do you think golf is better when there are a lot of guys in the mix?
I think this rivalry between McIlroy and Spieth is absolutely it's a work of genius, because I think it's going to bring young people flocking to the game like nothing probably has in the last 2 decades. And I take your point entirely. I think golf at that level needs a really wonderful rivalry, and I can't see anything but in Spieth and McIlroy, just as it was magical with the big three, Nicklaus, Palmer, and Player. And I must say that you mentioned Casper, and Billy Casper should have been a member of that group if he had been recognized for the talent he had and the brilliance that he displayed. He was probably the most aggressive putter before Tom Watson at the start of his career that I ever saw. And Billy Casper was probably the greatest golfer, most underrated in my lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I had the honor of having Mr. Casper on the show a few times over the last couple of years, and it's amazing. To your point, he is not given enough credit for how often he won back in the 60s. I mean, he won just as often as Mr. Nicklaus did, and more often than Palmer and Player combined. Yet few people seem to know that. Hence, his book, The Big Three and Me. Yeah, I agree. He's certainly, unfortunately, a man who has flown too long underneath the radar.
Yeah, when I first came to this country, thanks to Jack Whitaker, I was made an overseas member of Wingfoot. and which was really a fantastic privilege for me. So that if I had any time before flying back to London between, events for CBS, I would go there and play with Jack. And we had a lovely time there. But I never could get over the fact that when Casper won the Open at Wingfoot in 1959, he had fewer putts, I think it was 104, than anybody had ever had at Wingfoot in a major event. And I don't suppose that has changed. I would still bet that Casper's 104 putts in 72 holes is probably a record that still stands. I'd love to know.
Right. So, Mr. Wright, more forward and stuff that has happened more recently here. Now, following Jim Furyk's win last week at Harbour Town, people are starting to take a look at his career and kind of reflect: is Jim Furyk a Hall of Famer? 17 wins, one major back at the 2003 U.S. Open at Olympia Fields. His career is right there with Freddie Couples, who had 15 wins and a major. In your mind, are those two guys Hall of Famers?
Well, I suppose yes. I'm not sure that I know anymore what is a Hall of Famer, because I think the World Golf Hall of Fame got it all wrong. They allowed too many people in that I felt were questionable. Right. And even my countryman, Colin Montgomery, who I like enormously as a person, he got in without ever having won a major, and I question that, and I'm very happy that they have sort of taken a year off, and I starting to rethink the way they do things. But I couldn't possibly allow a golfer into the World Golf Hall of Fame if he had not won at least one major. And I'm not trying to disparage Colin Montgomery, who was a phenomenal golfer for the Europeans for a start, and a very good Ryder Cup captain. And he headed the Order of Merit in Europe for 7 consecutive years. So I'm not really disparaging him, but I think you've got to have hallmarks for getting into the hall, and majors are still, as far as I'm concerned, the most important thing that you can achieve in the game of golf.
And I agree, and that's sort of why I asked the question, because when I look at somebody that has won, like I could say 15 times for Fred Couples, 17 times for Jim Furyk, you have one major. I believe, and I could be wrong about this, but I believe it's Gary Player who has talked about having a certain threshold you need to have to be considered a Hall of Famer, and I think he threw the number out there, 6 majors in order to get in. I could be wrong about that number. I'd have to look it up. But I would think you would have to win, to your point, maybe not even one major, but multiple majors. When I think about Hall of Fames, whether it's in the other sports, baseball, football, hockey, basketball, these are folks that, have been extraordinary at what they did. And to your point about diluting potentially the Hall of Fame, but, a dozen wins, one major tournament, to me doesn't seem like the number that I would have in mind. I would think it would be multiple majors to get yourself into a Hall of Fame. I'm curious. Like I say,
I'm with you completely, Chris. I didn't mention Freddie Couples, who got in at the same time as Colin Montgomery, but he and Jim Furyk, having only one major each. I somehow find myself, if that is true about Gary Player saying you should have 6 majors, I would really go along with that very willingly.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I would think, that at some point, and that gets, Sir Nick Faldo in, to get the upper echelon folks. That's a tough number to reach, and I understand that, you may not have as many members in the World Golf Hall of Fame, and that 6 majors is a tough number to get to, but I think that's what a Hall of Fame is, right? It's not for everybody. It's not for the very good. It's for the great. And I'm interested to see what they do with that going forward.
You know something, Chris? It became a thing that they were going to let people in. Whatever happened, they were going to let a lot of people in every year. I think that it would be much more sensible if they only allowed the person into the World Golf Hall of Fame, even if they went 5 years without even letting anybody in. I think it became an avalanche and a really destructive avalanche to destroy the standards. And, that's probably a very unkind thing to say, but I'm sorry, it's something I believe.
Nah, and I'm with you. Mr. Wright, kind of going maybe a little bit away from the golf course itself, but you had a role in the movie Tin Cup, calling a shot that Kevin Costner's character Roy McIlroy hits a bank shot off a porta-john on.
I don't know about this. I'm not sure that I heard you correctly, Chris. I shall never forget the fact that I had Rory as a caddy when he was a 16-year-old boy. I don't know. Have I told you that story? I think I've lost you. Uh-oh. Hello? Hello? Fucking thing. Hello?
Hello, Mr. Wright, can you hear us?
Yeah, I lost you.
Yeah, we lost you there for a second. We're still here.
Well, we're back again. I'm very sorry about that. There's nothing
no
I
worries.
can... Anyhow, what was your question? I've forgotten.
That's okay. I said you had a role in the movie Tin Cup. You called the shot that Kevin Costner's character, Roy McIlroy, hits a bank shot off a porta-john onto the green. I was just curious, what was it like being a part of that movie, and how many times did it take them to get that shot right?
Well, it was a lot of fun. Although, movie making can be very boring. That take of Kevin Costner, hitting the porta-john and spinning the ball onto the green, took 86 takes. It was all of one day with 2,500 extras who had breakfast, lunch, and supper. And when he finally pulled off the shot, Kevin, they rushed forward as they had to do 86 times. But there was a real sense of elation. They overdid it almost because they were so glad they were going to be allowed to go home. And it was, I mean, those kind of things, they do drag on you a bit, But at the same time, I thought it was a great movie, except I didn't like the ending of the movie. And I complained to the director, Ron Shelton. I said, Ron, that was absolutely a ridiculous ending to a really good movie. And he took a drag on his foot-long cigar and said, that's Hollywood, baby. And that's the end of that.
That's great. That's right. You had an amazingly successful career. You're an Emmy Award winner. You were nominated for an Emmy multiple times. I know we're in an ultra politically correct society now, but actors and athletes in particular have done far worse things than you and have gotten second, third, fourth chances. We see it so often in Major League Baseball. We see it all the time in the NFL these days. And God bless, and I want to give a shout out to Matt Adams and Dominic Scarano for reaching back out to you to have you on their show, Fairways of Life, which is on SiriusXM's PGA channel. But do you ever wonder to yourself now when you see what athletes have done and the really horrible things, whether it's drugs or domestic violence or all the things we see, do you ever wonder, these guys get multiple chances. Why didn't I get a second chance?
Well, the great thing is that Matt Adams and his producer, Dominic Scarano, gave me a chance to be on SiriusXM with them on the Fairways of Life. And that was really the only second chance I've ever had. And I must say, it's much more fun, Chris, for me to broadcast on the radio because you're not so utterly scared about this political correctness, this rubbish that, that virtually makes people afraid to speak their mind. And I presumably should have been a bit more careful maybe because I spoke my mind to a reporter who admitted she had no idea of one end of a golf club from the other. That should have been a warning signal to run for the bushes. But unfortunately, I stayed and I got shot down as a result. But I can honestly say this without, I hope, offending anybody, that at least 1,000 women have rubbed up against me since I said that boobs got in the way of a golf swing, and said, of course they do. Of course they get in the way. And, the very fact is, all I said was the truth, but that the truth is sometimes not allowed if it's politically incorrect. And on this occasion, I got the bullet after a long time.
I'm just so surprised, and like I said, I'm disappointed because I miss your voice being associated with the game of golf and getting to see and hear you on TV. But I just don't understand. Here we are so many years later, and like I say, we see athletes and actors that continue to make the same mistake over and over and over again, and talent wins out, and they get to have that second, third, and fourth chance. I just never understood why somebody, whether it was CBS or not, hasn't reached out to you over the 25, 30 years since you've been gone to get someone of your talent and your magnitude doing something on a regular basis, whether at this stage in your life you want to do that or not, but all the years that happened in between, because you should have been a staple in the game of golf.
Thank you very much, Chris. All I can say is that when Matt Adams asked me to be on his show for the rest of my life, I was close to 80 years of age at the time, and I said, Matt, that could be 3 weeks. And Matt said, we'll take a chance on that. And here it is. I think it's 4 years I've been with them now. If it isn't 4, it's 3. And it's been a very rewarding thing for me, Chris. I like to talk about golf because it is my passion. Alas, not as a player much anymore. seen better days as far as that is concerned. But I still have the same affection for the game and its players that I had in the first place when I watched Ben Hogan win at Carnoustie, the British Open, and determined that I would spend the rest of my life around golf. And the fact that I have been able to do so is just such a joy to me as I approach my 83rd birthday. You know, it's such a joy to have been able to achieve one's ambition and have a wonderful time, as I have had, traveling the world at other people's expense and seeing all the great places and all the great golf courses, all the great players. I mean, how can you possibly, you can't beat that, I don't think.
No, I agree completely with that. One more, Mr. Wright, before we let you go, and something people may not know, that you're a golf course designer as well. You're the architect for the Cliffs Valley Golf Course up in Travelers Rest, South Carolina, which opened, I think, 20 years ago now almost, to some rave reviews. Are you still active in golf course design projects?
Not really. No, it was a hobby. It was a hobby, Chris, and I just got lucky. I got a beautiful piece of property, and it would have been a crime if I'd have screwed it up. And it's just worked out very well. And actually, you're spot on. We opened 20 years ago on October the 2nd when I put on an exhibition match between Paul Azinger, Jim Colbert, Bob Murphy, and the local boy Jay Haas. And Azinger and Haas challenged the old boys who were on the senior tour at the time to a match for their own money. And I never saw so many $100 bills flashing about, but it made for fantastic entertainment because at the very first hole, Azinger holed his second shot with a wedge for an eagle 2. Then the old boys hit back at the second hole, which is a par 3, where they both made 2s. And we had a chip-in eagle at the 6th hole by Jim Colbert. And, I mean, what a fantastic way to open a golf course with a match of such quality.
Right.
As a matter of fact, Azinger and Bob Murphy both scored 68 off the tip of the back tees, and neither of them had ever seen the golf course.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Mr. Wright, I can't thank you enough for being a part of the show again with me this morning. You are welcome here for the rest of your life too, I might add. Your stories are so wonderful to hear, and I can't thank you enough for being. This is the third time we've been fortunate enough to have you on the show. I hope we get to have you on a whole bunch more because I could sit back and listen to you tell stories like Donnie Hammond said all day long.
Well, the thing is, Chris, you better make it quick, you know. I'm getting way up there now, but I love it. You call me anytime.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wright. All the best to you and your family, and I look forward to the next opportunity. Hopefully, I will absolutely make it real soon.
Thank you very much, Chris. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Enjoy your weekend. Ben Wright, and I tell you what, it doesn't get any better than that, folks. You want to listen to a gentleman who knows so much about the game of golf because he was sitting there watching it happen and broadcasting it to the rest of us. To hear him tell stories about his time at Augusta National is something that never gets old to me. He was there, when Jack obviously won in '86, but also there for everything going all the way back to the '60s. So I look forward to the privilege of having Mr. Wright back on the show again real soon. All right, before we close up shop, I want to remind you about a great book from our friends Dave Stockton and Dave Stockton Jr. called Own Your Game. if you're starting to sharpen your game up physically, and I know for our, as Donnie Hammond said, for our friends up in the Northeast, my co-host on Thursday Night Tailgate, Bob Lazzari, still snowing up there as late as this week. So if you're just starting to get the rust off that way, remember so much of the game is played in that 5-inch space between our ears. Get your mind right. In this latest book, the Stocktons let you know how to use your mind to play winning golf. Own Your Game recreates the experience of riding 18 holes with Dave Stockton at one of his highly sought-after corporate outings and draws from his experience as a champion tour player, a 2-time major winner, and a revered coach. He shows you how to think better, stay calmer, execute more consistently, and most importantly, how to enjoy the game more thoroughly. Go to StocktonGolf.com to get your copy, and for a couple extra dollars, he'll even autograph it for you. All right, everybody, it's time for me to put a bow on this one. My sincere thanks one more time to Donnie Hammond and Mr. Ben Wright for joining me this morning and making the show so much fun. And we thank you for tuning in. You know we appreciate you the very most. Please also check out our sister show, ThursdayNightTailgate.com, with me and my co-host Bob Lazzari, our announcer Joe LaGenusa. That show airs live every Thursday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. You can catch it on Blog Talk Radio starting again at 10:15 Eastern Time on the Armed Forces Radio Network. And on Friday nights, you can hear us from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time over on Boost Radio, and starting again 11 o'clock Eastern Time on Armed Forces Radio. We're joined every single week by legends from around the NFL and the CFL. Please also check out both shows on Facebook. Give us a like. That's important to us, too. You can find the shows, this show, nextonthet.net online and ThursdayNightTailgate.com as well. From either site, you can stream or download any of our archive episodes for free, plus keep up to date with who some of our future guests are going to be. Thank you again for choosing to listen to the show today. Again, I appreciate you the very most. Until next week, hit 'em straight, my friends.